welcome everyone. It's really wonderful to see all of you coming up on the chat here. It's really quite amazing. We've had a fantastic response, and we had over, well, 1,000 attendees sign up today. So hopefully we'll get near to that number as people sign on. So really wonderful to see everyone. My name is Paula Orrell. I'm the director of CVAN, Contemporary Visual Arts Network for England, and also an independent curator. Genuinely welcome to the launch of Art is Essential campaign. I want to describe myself. I'm sat down and have brown hair tied back with brown eyes, white skin, and a yellow and blue shirt with a high neck jumper underneath. It is a great honour to introduce this event and explain why we have invited the visual arts sector to launch this campaign collectively. Due to the format, we can't experience who all the attendees are. So if you would like to put your name in the chat and where you are from and your artwork as status, that would be lovely. Thank you. So a year ago, we wondered what would happen as we felt the virus getting closer. In that time, life has changed dramatically. I can't thank my colleagues at CVAN enough for keeping me sane and being there for that coffee and a genuine need to vent. However, that hasn't stopped me feeling isolated and just wanting to be back at Spike Island in Bristol and go back to engaging with colleagues, ideas, experiences, and immerse myself with kindred spirits. CVAN National is hosted by the brilliant BALTIC in Newcastle and works for and on behalf of the 9 regions from Cornwall to Cumbria. We are a free-to-join network that hosts events, discussions, sector development programmes for professional practice and interconnected into each region's ecology. I am responsible for the Southwest as well. The ambition of CVAN National is to become a lobbying platform to the government and other stakeholders to provide the continuation of public funding to ensure that they hear about the impact of the pandemic and now the absurd deal of Brexit that we are stuck with, which in some way makes me feel more isolated than COVID. I'm here today to explain why campaigning, lobbying, advocating is so essential. As an art form, we are not on the government's radar. They believe, in fact, that the arts should all retrain. We are not referred to. Museums, large-scale institutions in the capital are considered, but in our CVAN work over the last year, looking at policy and the lack of representation, the visual arts has not scratched the surface. This is not about placing one art form against another, as the most effective agenda is to come together with others. However, at this point, it is a critical time as the government works towards a comprehensive spending review, which will impact on all of our livelihoods for the next 3 years. We believe we need to have agency and represent your work. Art is Essential is a campaign that's been brought together collectively with individuals, sector support organisations and representative of galleries and institutions from across the country. Going back to the point about isolation, the lack of visibility of our art form in the media and its lack of profile across platforms, we need to protect ourselves, but we need to represent the artists and art workers who are highly threatened by the pandemic and drive a campaign representing the critical worker here and the majority of this audience who are artists. Our panel will present their perspectives for 5 minutes about why they think this campaign is necessary. And then CVAN's brilliant communications manager, Katie Lineker, will explain how to get involved. Both Katie and I will stay on at the end to answer any crucial questions that come up in the chat. Introducing our panel, we have a great collective of artists, curators, artist-led projects, sector support organisations and galleries and institutions. In order is Woodrow Kernohan, the director of John Hansard Gallery in Southampton, with artist Helen Cammock, who are both co-chairs of Visual Arts Southwest, one of CVAN's 9 regions. Sheryll Catto will talk about ActionSpace, who support artists with learning disabilities. I am a big fan of their work, especially artist Naina Kalu, who I hope we will hear about her work today and why art is essential to her. Sarah Munro is the director of BALTIC and our brilliant chair for CVAN National. Sandra is the director of CHEAD, who is the representative body for art and design education and part of our collective work, building alliances across different sector representation. Laura Silas is the director of MIMA, which I've watched with great curiosity as she has placed education at the heart of this organisation in Middlesbrough. Matthew Burrows is an artist and a genius behind the Artist Support Pledge, which has been a lifesaver for many artists selling work over the last year. The brilliant Julie Lomax, AN, the Artist Information Company, are one of our critical partners. Julie has extensive experience with visual arts and now leading AN, which hopefully needs no intro other than celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. Alfredo Cramerotti is director of the MOSTYN Gallery and co-chair of Visual Arts Galleries Wales with Chris Brown from G39. It is great to have their commitment alongside a Devolved Nations network for the visual arts. I can't urge you enough to get behind this campaign, and we collaborate to make our art form visible. Thank you, and handing over to Woodrow.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the amazing introduction and call to action, Paula. That was incredible. It's amazing to see everyone in the audience and all the fellow panels. Panelists, my name is Woodrow Kernohan, and to describe myself, I'm a 45-year-old white male with brown eyes, brown curly hair, glasses, a black and white noise jumper, and I'm surrounded by artworks by friends and family. I am the director of John Hansard Gallery that's part of the University of Southampton. I'm also co-chair of Visual Arts Southwest alongside Helen Cammock, who's speaking next. Thank you everyone for inviting me to speak as part of today's Art is Essential launch. It's a real privilege to be here with such a fantastic lineup of speakers. Art is part of the essential fabric that makes us human. Through art, we think. More than being a mirror to reflect the world, it is through art that we can question, imagine, and shape a better world. Preparing for today's launch, I asked the John Hansard Gallery team which of our projects most embodied art is essential for them. Their responses were so inspiring that I thought I'd share them with you today. Val, our head of operations, highlighted Laura Henser's project, City Portraits, where larger-than-life photographic banners of Southampton residents were displayed throughout the city centre. Involvement in this project led to one participant running for election as a local councillor. His neighbours had seen his portrait up in the city centre and assumed this meant he was someone important. So they started coming to his door, asking him to help with various matters. So as a result, he decided that he should stand for election in order to properly represent his neighbours and local community. Nadia, our exhibitions curator, chose Mikhail Karakis's Children of Unquiet. Over several weeks, Mikhail worked with a group of students from a small school referral unit to create a short animation in response to Southampton's geothermal plant. The resulting animation was premiered at a special screening for the students' friends and families, and each of the participants achieved Arts Award. As a legacy of the project, the school was enabled also to become an Arts Award school. Roz, our head of program and senior curator, selected Lindsay Sears' incredible project, Every Thought There Ever Was. Using digital animation, robotics, film, drawing, and sound design, Lindsay's project brought together avatar therapy, neuropsychology, cognitive and computational neuroscience with artists and patients' voices. Amy, our head of development, chose our work with the University of Southampton colleagues to promote the STEAM agenda through the Southampton Science and Engineering and Human Worlds festivals. Working with artists like Haroon Mirza to embed arts and humanities within STEM, changing the agenda to STEAM. These programs celebrate the contribution that art makes to the development of essential skills like collaboration, communication, problem solving, and critical thinking. Lynn, our head of engagement and learning, highlighted our new ambassadors program with participants who are actively engaged with their communities. Through tailored professional development, the ambassadors receive hands-on experience of an arts venue, practical training and mentoring. So far, this program has resulted in self-initiated community groups, startups, and Safe Spaces Sutton, uncovering some of Southampton's hidden public spaces. Vanessa, our engagement curator chose artist Suna Imre's durational project, Shaping Clay, with the local women's integration group. This project is a fantastic example of how reaching out and building direct community connections will generate long-term relationships where participants feel welcome, take ownership, and bring family and members of their community into new public spaces. Additionally, I'd like to highlight Community Takeover. Over 9 weeks, our main gallery was transformed into an open and welcoming space where anyone could come and be creative. Communities took the lead, and there were demonstrations and talks celebrating skateboarding, skateboarding culture, workshops promoting Art Asia's Mela Festival, as well as debates about the impact of fashion and textiles on the environment. We actively reach out of the gallery before inviting new audiences in, and this open and porous model of programming is something very close to my heart. Before handing over to Helen Cammock, I'd like to finish with an inspiring quote from Southampton City Council Cabinet Member for Culture and Homes, Councillor Satvir Kaur. She says, "Art and culture are the beating heart of our communities, creating civic pride, bringing people together and helping to address social needs. Art is essential. Please join us in this amazing campaign and help share the story that art is essential, enriching lives and transforming communities." Thank you, and handing over to Helen.
Thank you, Woodrow. My name's Helen Cammock. I'm an artist. I live between Brighton and London. I'll just describe myself. I'm a mixed race Black woman with close cropped black hair. I'm wearing a burgundy jumper today, large silver earrings and my glasses. So I'm an artist working across video, print, writing, photography and performance. I currently work nationally and internationally on self-determined projects, as well as commissions with museums, institutions and organisations. I also teach at the Royal College of Art, and I am the new co-chair of Visual Arts Southwest Network alongside Woodrow Kernohan. That's a bit of an intro to me. And I guess I'm probably maybe more than anyone else on the panel going to talk about my perspective as an artist in terms of this campaign. So art has always been a part of my life in different ways and with greater significance at certain times. So here are some of my thoughts about why art is essential. Age 12, I moved from London to Somerset, and it was both an isolating and marginalising experience for our family. But through this isolation, I began to read poetry, something that helped me engage with the written word, something that I'd struggled with previously to that. I taught myself to play the guitar and relatively quickly began to perform. This opened up as a young teenager a very different relationship to language and an opportunity to feel a connectedness, a way to express both my isolation, but also my growing political awareness, and to share that with audiences. Even if they were tiny to begin with, they were still audiences to me. And as an artist now, I see that art and my practice holds the same place for me. It's about the communication of my thoughts, my ideas, my hopes, my fears, and things that maybe I'm distressed about or angry about. I became an artist later in life. I was a social worker for 10 years. I decided to do an evening class in photography that filled a hole that had developed through not singing and performing anymore. The more I worked, the less I made. It again gave me an active space for reflection, for release, and to refocus both some of my stresses, but also to focus again on my imagination and my own inner world and its relationship to my outer world. I pretty quickly realized that I wanted to have these kinds of dialogues through art, and began the transition from social worker to artist, arts facilitator, lecturer, co-director of an arts festival, which I also shared with Woodrow Kernohan. And we've reconnected in our role with Visual Arts Southwest. So as many artists, I found myself doing multiple tasks, multiple jobs, whether those were paid or voluntary. It was this idea of the multiple activity that we undertake. Art for me is about the transformation of ideas. It's active and therefore has the potential to question, provoke and stimulate responses of all kinds, in fact. But it's also about something active to do. It can be therapeutic, enlivening, a learning experience. It can be a site of protest and provocation, a space for exploring and developing our own agency. Art is a way to connect with yourself and with others. Art for me is a touchstone. So I'm co-chair of the Visual Arts Southwest Steering Group, and I see myself as part of a network of people who believes that art is valuable to everyone and essential to society, to children's development as it is for people nearing the end of their lives, for those who work and for those who do not. It's recreational and it's professional. It's a way to bring people together, but it's also a way to divide opinion. And this is about dialogue. It's a reflection of the structures within which we live. So that means access, whether it's as an artist or an audience, is harder for some people than for others. And we know that that depends on race, gender identity, sexual orientation, whether you identify as disabled. The list is long and complex and intersectional. It's a place, though, for the development of the nimble mind and of lateral thinking. These things are really, really important for us all to remember. They ring in my head, this idea of the nimble mind and the lateral thinker, and all societies need these. The current social and political climate doesn't see the danger of removing children's right to art as part of their education, doesn't prioritise the place of art schools, the support of our museums and institutions, our libraries and our archives, and the many multifaceted arts projects across the UK. Collectively, there seems to have been a shift away from the value placed on the capacity of art to do many things, emotionally and intellectually, how it impacts on cultural forms, whether that's historical or whether it's in the contemporary, how it builds capacity and also resilience. But of course, without artists and the systems that support and nurture them, the people who generate work, ideas and aesthetic interruptions to our everyday, who challenge and provoke us, but also feed our imaginations and offer soothing and calming, containing and acknowledging spaces. Without them or us, where would we be? I'm here to stress that there are artists struggling, as though they are the last people we must protect and support in times of crisis. There are no furloughs, no team to be part of. We have projects postponed and cancelled and nothing to sustain us. We are very often on our own. I'm probably in a better position than many, and I'm completely conscious of that. And so it's my duty, I feel, to speak out. But what we must remember is that without artists, the whole arts ecology cannot survive. It has been a historical mistake in the past, the stereotype of the starving artist who relies on handouts and patronage, or the artist who earns a living only when they are dead. The life of an artist is a scramble for the fittest. We challenge this as artists, but the system has certain blueprints that are difficult to navigate if we want to show and to make. Art should have presence throughout our lives and our communities, and it shouldn't only be about one formal medium that everyone must be the best. So I believe that we must work together to ensure artists, collectives, art education, art institution, museums, art charities and community projects are all valued, supported, nurtured and recognised in the world we inhabit. Because without them, or us, the world we inhabit is certainly depleted. Art is essential, and who could even challenge it? Okay, with that, I'm going to hand over to Sheryll Catto.
Hi, thank you, Helen. That was amazing. I'm Sheryll Catto, and I'm the co-director of ActionSpace. We're a London-based visual arts organization that supports artists with learning disabilities. We work with about, 70 artists on a regular weekly basis, all ages from 18 to about 75. Entire spectrum of learning disability from mild to profound. About 60% of our artists have complex needs, and of those, about 70% would be classified as having nonverbal. We support them by providing them with access to our studios, with materials, with equipment, and the mentoring support from an artist facilitator who works with them over a number of years to support them in developing their practices and then maintaining professional practices. To represent our artists properly, I need to show you their work. So I'm just going to very quickly show you the work of 5 of our artists, beginning with Nena Kaulu, who Paula mentioned earlier, the fabulous Nena Kaulu. Nena has been working with us since 1999, and she works specifically with Charlotte Hollinshead, who is our associate artist and runs our South London studio, which is based at Studio Voltaire. Nena works in 2D and 3D, and her work is very much about building up repetitive motions and images into these sort of amazing creations. Nena has work that has been bought for a number of corporate and private collections. She had a solo exhibition for Glasgow International in 2018. Then she had a solo exhibition at Humber Street Gallery in Hull in 2019. And just before we closed for COVID last year, she had a solo exhibition in central London as part of Studio Voltaire's Elsewhere program. Next is Andrew Omeding. Andrew's someone who is in his 30s now, and we've worked with him since he was 18, originally from a young people's project. Andrew uses found materials and just bits and pieces to create small sculptural objects, which then come together into installations which tell the story of his life. Andrew is verbal, but he struggles with telling stories and sort of working verbally. So his practice is really important to him because it also helps him sort of process some of the traumas he's had in his life. Thompson Hall is a political artist, has developed into a political artist, and he uses his large, colorful paintings to explore sort of issues that are really important to him, which at the moment have to do with social change, a lot around COVID and the politics of COVID, the politics of the sort of green agenda and Black Lives Matter. Ian Warnast is someone who is verbal, but again finds communicating verbally challenging. Ian's work is all about London and about transport around London. And he lives in an area of London that's going through quite a lot of regeneration at the moment, which he finds confusing at times. And he uses his work to really think through and try and understand what's going on and to sort of cope with the idea that every time he goes out, he sees something new. Ian also actually works with us. He's worked with us for 21 years as a studio assistant. Linda Bell has a really interesting two-part practice. She's a studio artist and she creates these wonderful textile creations, but also she is a workshop leader and she co-leads workshops for other people with learning disabilities. So she's led workshops at day centers and at schools and as part of larger events. Nena is classically autistic. She's hearing impaired. She has very limited verbal skills, but she does all of this because she is able to work visually through her artwork. And then finally, Pardit Kapil, who has the most interesting experimental live art practice, which has to do with creating environments and atmospheres, and then inviting people in to sort of interact with the environment he's created. And then he actually directs them to sort of go through stories and scenarios. And his practice is really quite interesting for someone like that. So the question is art essential? And it is absolutely essential to our artists. Given that a lot of them find verbal communication difficult, the ability to work visually gives them a medium in which they can process and then they can communicate their thoughts, their feelings, and their ideas. It helps them develop a social group. It's been an absolute nightmare in lockdown. In fact, last week, one of our artists was out for a walk with his support worker and led him to ActionSpace. And it took 20 minutes for the support worker to try and explain to him, no, ActionSpace isn't open at the moment. It also helps them develop the skills, the self-confidence, and the attitude to take agency in their own lives and to make decisions about their lives, which is often something that they aren't able to do. But most importantly of all, they make art, they are artists. And that means that they are defined by their skills and their abilities and talents and not solely by their disabilities. And we're delighted to be part of this campaign. We're very strongly in favor of this campaign and really delighted to see where it goes. So I'm now going to stop sharing and hand over to Sarah.
Thank you, Sheryll. That was I just had a little moment there when you were talking, because the last time I was in London before the pandemic was with Sheryll in those exhibitions and meeting and spending time with those very artists. And it was just as you were talking, I was just reminded of that was almost a year ago. And that was the last time I did a gallery visit to a London institution. In fact, it was the last time I was in London. So what a lot has changed since then. But thank you for that. Yeah, so I suppose this is for us, it just feels so exciting. I am so thrilled to hear everybody's different ideas and how art is essential for all of you. And I think there's real commonality that we can see really running across this. And I could talk about, I remember really vividly the very first time I was taken into an art gallery by my mum in Edinburgh. We were in a park, it was pouring with rain, Edinburgh being Edinburgh. Just across the road was a botanic garden with a building in it that was free to go into. And actually it was the original home of the founding home of the Scottish National Gallery of Modern Art. And I remember absolutely vividly going into that space for the first time and it feeling quite, and my mum talks about this, I think I was apparently 5, and my mum talks about how I've got brothers and sisters and they were hurling around the building, but I was just utterly transfixed and at these images. And it kind of had this thing at that time, my favourite children's programme was Mr. Ben, and that sense that you could take on and be taken somewhere else. You could see something that would talk and say something to the world in a way that somehow really connected to me, even as a child, really quickly, that I couldn't articulate into words. And to see that kind of, so huge impact for me personally in my life. I could also then really we could talk about the importance of this economically to generate incomes for our communities. We could talk about this, really significantly in terms of how it builds connectivity. I think one of the critical things at the moment is the role that art is essential in terms of us imagining futures. And I love the way Helen, we talked about the nimble mind and the need for the lateral thinker. And I think all of those are things with this huge challenges we face ahead of us as a world, the big global challenges, as well as the kind of mental health challenges and public health challenges, that art plays this absolutely critical and core essential role in terms of us building our resilience, our empathy, in effect building and fighting back for the democratic deficit that we see and quite frighteningly everywhere, and that sense of building empathy and understanding. But what, and I quite like Woodrow, I think, in this approach, but what I suppose the last few days I've spent a lot of time hearing and listening to the voices and feedback of our young people. And it's a really, really difficult moment. The impact on families, on young children, on our young people of lockdown is utterly profound. And I thought what I would do then is use my platform here to give a little bit of voice to the comments that have come back when we asked them about how they felt art was essential. So I'm going to start with 2 quite short ones that come from, and actually we're not used to having blinding sun in Glasgow either, so my apologies if that's affecting the screen. It's rather unusual. We have deep snow and blinding sun. So the first one, the quote, is come from one of our young people who's involved in a long-term creative project that we run at BALTIC. We'll call them Joe. They didn't want to be named, so I'm going to call them Joe. Art mix and art has helped me for my future. The different art forms and mediums have helped me towards my exams at school. I like expressing myself in the projects we do, as I wish to be an artist. Young people are the next generation and we will run the world. It's important you listen to us. Be aware. And then the second little quote I'm going to bring here is from a group we've set up, and it's specifically for young women. This project, they're roughly around the ages of 12 to 14. And this comment came from somebody, again, didn't want her name used, I'll call her Claire. So Claire said, I have changed over the course of this 13-week art programme, and I have gained more confidence and more self-love and more self-respect. It has made me into a more hard-headed, independent woman. I can think of no better reason why art is essential than that. And now I'm going to take a slightly longer quote, but this one is from a young local parent who lives in Gateshead and has a 1-year-old, nearly 2 now, but young child. And this is from a piece that they had put together just before December. So Tom and Ziggy. Ziggy is the child. The first lockdown was in many ways one great reminder, or so I would assume, for most people with no garden or green space to call their own, of the immense importance of public green space, which the Victorian reformers bequeathed to communities like Gateshead. And he talked a lot about the impact of being able to take his child out to the park at that in the first lockdown. But now, during the second and indeed third one, as I push Iggy, wet and irritable, from his assistance of diving into puddles head first, I'm reminded of the importance of something else, our indoor public parks, which have been closed. This time last year, we were taking Iggy, perhaps pretty much every weekend, to the Baltic. The room in the Baltic is where Iggy learned to roll over and learned to stand. Before I became a parent, I assumed an art gallery had its value in providing a space for the display of works which invite aesthetic contemplation or whatever, disinterested and disembodied as Kant and the critique of power of judgment assumed our response to beautiful things must be. But I now know better. An art gallery, first and foremost, is somewhere you can take your kids to play. There is frankly no other space in most British urban centres quite like them. Places which are at once free and indoors, where children can caper around, interacting and learning, she says, trying to get out of the sun. When you are a parent, being able to inhabit spaces like this feels like more than a relief. There are places where you know your child is unlikely to be bored. These are places where the surefit thing is that they will be able to play. Within Iggy's lifetime, the Baltic has been great at putting on shows that kids can interact with, from Heather Phillipson's hallucinatory The Age of Love to Philip Pippa Hale's wonderful Play Rebellion, or our hopeful, and it states, Pandemic Gods and Government Willing, Albert Petroni's Equal Play, which we're hoping to open later on this year at Baltic. Got one final bit, sorry. So, as long as there remain grey, rainy days in the north of England to endure, the indoor park will always remain an essential social good. Long may they continue to escape the catastrophic funding cuts which existentially threaten anything halfway good. And I think that for me really sums up, from a very different perspective of our young people, the why we all have to fight for continuing to ensure that art is essential. And that to me, it's one of the most critical things that we can do going forward. And I think that's really very much behind what this campaign is about, that you can see yourselves, you can see different people can see how they can attach and get behind this campaign. So thank you all very much. And I'll now, I think I am handing over to, who am I handing over to? Sandra? I think Sandra Booth, I'm handing over to you. Thank you. I forgot to introduce myself. So just for those that were listening and need the audio description, I am a very much on the other, almost on the far end of a middle-aged woman. I was sitting in the corner of my living room with a plant and some books and CDs behind me, and I've got red hair that's kind of buffed up on top of my head in a slightly scruffy manner, and was wearing an orange tracksuit top. I'm now going to hand over. My apologies for forgetting to do that earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. That's great. It's lovely to be engaged with everybody today. It's so inspiring. I'm here to advocate for arts education. So my name's Sandra. I work for the Council for Higher Education, Art and Design. I'm currently wearing a red dress and I'm wearing glasses. And I've got really long dark hair, which I haven't actually had cut for a year. So here we go. Visual arts education gives the next generation of artists, creators and cultural leaders the opportunity to develop imagination and skills that are vital to our future. Art makes you look and see and think. Studying art develops empathy and skills that are vital to our future, and art makes you look and see. A priority for this campaign is to retain broad
access to high quality courses in creative subjects. This is vital to sustaining the strength and diversity of our talent pools, with 28 entrants in the standing partnerships with cultural organisations. Art education is essential. Provision is diverse, dispersed and innovative, with over 1,000 courses from 172 providers at undergraduate level and 304 postgraduate courses catering for some 180,000 students a year. Creative art and design is the top subject among students aged 20 and under. The cultural ecosystem is underpinned by the individuals emerging from and engaging with an arts education, but the long-term drop-off in creative provision in schools is causing a crisis in arts. Access to arts must start in schools. We must broaden the EBAC to include creative subjects, an argument that has been made by the Durham Commission. Any deprioritisation of arts pedagogy and practice is strategically short-sighted and counterintuitive to wider cultural recovery and skills policy. T-levels could serve art particularly badly. The language of technical implies a divide not apply in practice-based and critically reflective disciplines like the visual arts. It's disturbing that recent policy announcements of cuts to the teaching grant for high-cost subjects, removal of teacher training bursaries for art and design teachers, debates about the value of a degree measured in terms of a route to a high-paid job, proposed defunding of level 3 qualifications would further narrow choice and curtail access to many artists at a critical stage of their learning. Any attempts to drive student choice towards STEM subjects all signal a deep lack of understanding of the agency of art and are completely at odds with other policy interventions, particularly as we enter a recession and at a time when cultural organisations advocating increased investment in the art. I think that's a standout takeaway for us as to how broader education policy should be working in England and across the other devolved nations. Squeezing arts education is something no government concerned with productivity and growth should want to do. Arts education make a vital contribution to the global success of the UK's cultural sector. So as part of this campaign, we are calling for these disciplines to be reclassified as strategically important subjects. Higher education is an entry route into the creative economy, and some 71%
I think we might
qualified at degree level or higher creative pipeline. Suppressively we are funded and the way we are measured. There is a perception that art schools are a luxury, produce too many graduates who will never earn enough to pay back their student loans. And from a market neoliberal perspective, this supports those in government seeking to streamline provision by adopting a narrow view of value. Without sustained investment, provision and delivery would be seriously threatened and destabilised, leading to inequity and cold spots in some areas, which would level down and limit access to opportunities for less advantaged learners and underrepresented groups. We must protect arts education and we must support students, graduates, and art teachers who are also creative practitioners and may now be facing hardship and dual precarity, combining both teaching and being a practicing with our visual art sector, working through their own galleries and partnerships with cultural organisations and freelance artist communities, demonstrating a variety of educational, social justice and community engagement purposes with broad cultural reach and impact. These partnerships between educators and visual artists provide the infrastructure to drive sustainable economic recovery, to transform our lives and rebuild the civic and social fabric of the UK's towns, cities and high streets. Art education empowers artists to reach their full potential. If we don't protect arts education, we'll lose the next generation of artists. Any curb on educational opportunity is a curb on our culture. Art changes the world, never more so than now. Hashtag art is essential. I commend this campaign to you and I'm delighted to be involved. I now am going to hand over to Laura.
Hi everyone, my name's Laura Sillars. I'm Director of MIMA and Dean of the MIMA School of Art and Design. I'm trying to work out what you can see, but while you do that, I'll just tell you who I am. So I'm a white 40-something female, hair was a bob, now is way below the shoulders from a lot of unkempt lockdown inaction. I'm wearing a blue polo neck and I've got a bunch of very cheerful daffodils next to me. Okay, I'm going to flick through these very quickly and then get onto my point. Basically, I've tried to stick to one point here, so I'm not going to tell you much about MIMA. All I'm going to say is it's blooming marvellous. Look it up online. We've flipped online. There's loads of stuff online, and the big thing we've been doing during these lockdown periods is the magazine MIMA. We've sent over 35,000 of these out to our communities. Our communities are writing in them, and we've found lots of opportunities to engage with artists and communities during this time. And you can find out most of that online. I'm going to leave this picture here, and then I'm going to just flip through these few, which are some of our communities, and hopefully you'll start to get the theme. So back to just my face now. Can I check that I'm not sharing any longer?
Yeah, we just see you now.
Fantastic. So art is essential. The risk of an event like today is that we're preaching to the converted. Art is essential and everybody nods. And the debate here isn't just whether art is essential. The debate is, if art is essential, does it need to be funded by public funds? So if art is essential, the argument I want to make here is that it needs to be understood beyond the art sector. And this is what I want to address. And I'm going to do that just by giving one example of a project that we've been working on at MIMA and the MIMA School of Art and Design over the last 3 months. And what I hope this project does is show not only why art is essential, but why it matters that it's paid for by the public. This project is about nature. During this year of lockdowns and restrictions, the nation has fallen back in love with nature. From tending our houseplants to walking in parks, woodlands, and if you live in the landscape of the Industrial Revolution, old railway lines that have been brought back into the natural landscape. We've sought refuge in the green shoots of our surroundings, whether in cities or in rural areas. We've found places to stand outside. To stand outside and to breathe fresh air has become more important than ever. And what has this to do with art, specifically visual art? So let me explain. In 2018, MIMA turned over its whole artistic programme to look at climate change and nature. And here we were able to build important relationships with visionary leaders of the Tees Valley Local Nature Partnership and with incredible artists and activists who are driving forward ideas about climate change and nature and what we can do about it. We worked closely with Natural England, who are the lead advisory agency for the government on the recovery of nature. We held conferences, commissioned artists, worked with communities to understand their hopes and dreams. And we built into this set of interdisciplinary relationships that are fueling us now. artists have a really important role to play in the space of nature recovery. And I just want to focus on that word for a minute, recovery. Our country is now one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. Wind back a couple of centuries and things were very different. The fields were jumping with crickets. The great crested newt was a common sight in our waters. The skies were full of migratory birds like nightingales, cuckoos, and swifts. But through human activity, agriculture, industrialization, capitalism, nature has depleted. The UK has lost 41% of our wildlife species since the early 1970s, when I was born. Since November, the team at MIMA have been working with climate scientists from the British Antarctic Survey, with Natural England Partners and the Tees Valley Nature Partnership, with networks of naturalists and ecologists. And we've discovered that there's a global conversation here, but it is a conversation that is struggling to make its message heard. We've heard about climate change, but we haven't talked so much about nature depletion. As Sir David Attenborough has said, no one will protect what they do not care about, and no one will care about what they have never experienced. Research also shows that nature intersects with inequality. If you're white, able-bodied, middle-class, male, you are far more likely to be enriched by natural resources, resources which raise your sense of well-being, your health, your fitness, and your sense of agency. After agriculture, the environment sector is the least diverse in our country. And so again, what has this to do with artists? So here I want to make a very bold and broad brush statement. At some level, art is about creating visions, reimagining the world as it is now, and seeing something that could be there in the future. In so doing, it enables others to make an extra logical step, a leap of faith perhaps, but if you can see it, you can be it. If all of our artists are envisioning the world from the background of safety, privilege, and security, they will simply not be able to produce the kind of visions that will help a diverse community step into a vision of the future. We do not need one vision, we need many visions, multiple diffractions, versions, and alternatives. I'm speaking from a place iconic as a scene of dystopia. The town in which I work was used as the skyline for Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. It is a place where most people voted Brexit for many reasons, and one of those reasons was their voices, their lived experiences, their needs as communities were not being heard. The vision of the future on offer was not one that people could imagine themselves or their children stepping into. If we allow artists to only be drawn from communities where everything they have is there, everything they need is there, we will never bridge the seismic gap between communities, peoples, places, cultures, economies, or recover our country's nature. Ecologists are starting to realize that in order to create change, they need to create a vision. To create a vision, they need to connect with artists, but art is at risk. Cultural recovery needs artists. Community recovery needs many brilliant, bold visions. Nature recovery needs cultural engagement. So as we make the case for art being essential, let's keep in mind that to be essential, we need other communities, other professions, other industries to believe that we have a role to play. To conclude, in my role, I work with many artists who we show at the brilliant MIMA that I've asked you to look up. I look after over 400 emerging artists and designers in the MIMA School of Art and Design, and I believe there is a role for them in this society in the future. And one of those roles is civic, community, a connecting role that will help build multiple visions of the future that can coexist. We face an existential crisis and we need to make a just transition. Public investment in visual art will mean that many voices can be heard. And we need to create space for those voices and space for a planet that can thrive. So from that point of view, the work that artists do is vital public work, and we need our artists. And that's me done. I'm going to pass over to Matthew Burrows.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Matthew Burrows. I'm an artist and the founder of Artist Support Pledge. I'm a white-skinned, middle-aged male wearing black shirt, headphones, grey cat, the beard, sitting in my studio in East Sussex in the southeast of the UK. So Artist Support Pledge was set up by myself on the 16th of March last year in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. It supports artists and makers by connecting them to buyers through digital media. It is now a cultural global movement and an important microeconomy. As an artist, my work explores the conditions in which we thrive and how we connect to our human and wild nature. What I've learned as an artist is that I see art with the calluses of experience, rather than the examined eye of the observer. If you like, I'm in the belly of the whale with the cold face. And as such, the best I can do is really to speak through analogy. So to know why art is essential, I must know what it is like. So I'm going to have a go with an analogy and try to describe how that might work. So art is like an oscillation switch for the mind. It connects and disconnects, continuously reforming our relationship to our sense of self, community, and environment. At its best, art breaks our assumptions and tied habits of mind and behavior, creating fluid relationships between the objective and subjective world. Doing this gives us the eyes to see and openly respond to who, what, and where we are. Individuals, communities, and societies who are adept at this can see wholly. They can see both what unifies and is common, and what is unique and special. There are two common barriers to seeing wholly: confirmation bias, seeing what we expect to see, and desirability bias, seeing what we want to see. Which of us does not fall into those categories sometimes? If left unattended, these biases can corrupt and disrupt our intelligence. And this is all too evident in our world politics at the moment. The problem is being smart doesn't help. In fact, it can make you more likely to fall into bias, as you're more able to justify your position, locking your oscillation switch in to connect. To be self-aware and connected as individuals and societies, we must also learn to disconnect. So why is this essential? To see wholly and possess the habits of mind that allow for its renewal, make us agile or nimble of mind, as Helen said, and resilient to change and uncertainty. We must allow ourselves to create productive connections, ones born not out of control, but a creative imagination equipped to navigate the world with humility, curiosity, doubt, and discovery. It is better to hold control lightly, as an artist might hold an idea, image, or form. It is better to welcome failure and learn to play with it. Better still, to learn to connect and disconnect. So art is essential because it allows us to turn on, to turn off, to turn on, to turn off. And that is essential for the well-being of ourselves, our communities, and our planet. And that is in the public good. And to really reiterate what Sandra has said about education, this must start in education. Art is not a luxury. It is not something we give to people to do as a hobby or to pass the time for somebody who is not academic. Art should be central to education. It shouldn't be our sideline. It shouldn't be something that we just do when we have the spare time. Because if we cannot connect and disconnect, we cannot think and we cannot rethink. And in times of crisis, upheaval and uncertainty and change, those are our greatest assets. So art is most certainly essential. Thank you, and I'll hand over to Julie Lomax.
Thanks, Matthew. I'm Julie Lomax. I'm the CEO of AN. By way of describing myself, I too have very long hair. It's not been cut for a year, and it's also two-tone. So it's blonde at the bottom and dark at the top. It's normally all blonde. I'm sitting in quite an austere room, and it's painted white, and if my head moves, you can see that I have a light bulb behind me which hovers above my head, and I've lived in this house for 20 years and still not got a light shade for that particular light. It does, however, have an eco-friendly light bulb in it. I've also got what I always like to refer as my age inappropriate lipstick on, because my niece bought it for me. She's a lot younger than me, but I do find it works quite well on Zoom. And I'm middle-aged. It was very hard to say that. I think it's the first time I have said it. So now I'm feeling slightly in shock. But getting back to the subject about art is essential. So AN has been supporting artists for 40 years. We've got over 20,000 members, and that is over 20,000 stories. Our support last year was very different, and we sadly heard over 7,000 stories from members and non-members where they were experiencing hardship of work and not being able to get into their studios and not being able to make work. And what we did is we were able to support over 1,000 of those people with hardship grants. And so where we think this campaign is really important is it's going to be important in telling our members' stories. And as I said, this will be 20,000 stories. And it's important that these stories are heard. And so from Shetland to Plymouth, Newcastle to Liverpool, Derry to London, Swansea to Margate, we have members all across the UK. And our members are teaching your children. They're creating the work that you pose in front of for your Instagram content. They're running the art workshops that perhaps your mum or your family or your friends are attending. They're making the work that you see in exhibitions, and remember, most of those exhibitions are free. They're making the art that creates headlines across the world. They're making art for festivals, and also making art that creates places that appear in film, TV, magazines, books, and even in your passport. One of our members is in your passport. Art is essential, hashtag, is the big reveal. And so get ready to meet 20,000 artists, and they will be telling their stories and why art is essential. And as Louise Bourgeois, great artist, said, tell your own story and you will be interesting. And we need to make sure that everybody is hearing these stories, and so that everybody knows that art is essential. I'm going to hand over now to Alfredo Cramerotti.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, everyone. My name is Alfredo Cramerotti. I'm director of MOSTYN in North Wales, in Llandudno, and I'm co-chair of the VAGO, which is the Visual Art Groups Wales, which gather basically the organization of visual arts in Wales. By way of describing myself, I'm white male, middle-aged, with no hair, which doesn't sound too good, but that's what it is. I'm sitting in my dining room at home in Llandudno, and I'm wearing a brown jumper. And I was I think we are kind of I believe we are running a bit over time, but anyway, I'll just make it 2 quick points about the art is essential and why it's important actually to join this campaign. And I was thinking actually about this time, you know, this a year of pandemic and with some light inside, but not quite there yet. And coming out actually of this situation with some sort of a easing of the restriction, there will be hopefully a lot of people who actually are okay, but also a lot of people who has been really hit financially and economically about the pandemic. Not to mention all the kind of freelance artists, for instance, and freelance people who kind of fell through the cracks actually of the social system. And I was just talking with a colleague actually this morning. I said, well, you know what? Most of visual arts organizations are for free. And it's, you know, they're public spaces. We are public spaces in MOSTYN. We are like a social hub anyway. Everyone can come in, everything is accessible. And it's something that is a safe space in a way, and is a safe space to exchange, you know, ideas and time. And they follow up with that one, which it was interesting actually that they came up this morning. It was that galleries are open most of the time, most of the days. So they're not only free, they're actually also very accessible. And unlike other art disciplines where you might actually enjoy or experience an art form, but you have a certain set time. You have to, first of all, maybe buy the ticket, but also be there at a certain time. And then when this time is finished, you have to go home or go somewhere else. Art galleries are quite different in that sense because they're really social hubs, and we are opening most of the day, and it's a space in which someone is able to somehow to be by themselves if they want, or to be with their beloved if they want, to rethink. Actually, Woodrow at the beginning mentioned actually that art is through art we think, and we rethink as well, and Helen as well actually correctly mentioned that we lateral think, hopefully, sometimes. We are able to lateral things and to change perspective on what happens around us. And I think art galleries and museums and visual art organizations actually are really important and essential because they embody such possibilities. I think I stop here because I don't want to go over time. So I'll just hand it over to Katie. Katie, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alfredo. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for staying on. We appreciate it. There's a lot of inspiration happening here, and I understand the energies will be dwindling. We want to know how we can actually galvanize and take the energy that we've taken from all the inspiring speakers today and actually put them into action. To describe myself, I'm a 35-year-old female. I have white skin and shoulder length brown hair, which is wavy. I'm sitting down in my office in St. Leonard's, which is by the sea. And I'm Campaigns and Communications Manager at CVAN, and it's been my great pleasure to be working in a very collaborative way with a lot of colleagues across the sector. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly. So we've heard our stories today, and we've all got our own stories to tell, and that's really what Arts Essential is all about, making a lot of noise to make sure that our art form is visible, and we need you to be part of that visibility. So the strength of this campaign is down to each and every one of us here today to be part of it. So we want you to tell your stories and show the far-reaching impact on the visual arts, regionally and nationally, on our well-being, our communities, how we live, work, and communicate. Whether you're an artist, an arts freelancer, arts educator, arts professional, venue, organization, network, charity, and everybody in between, we want you to share your story and put it under the umbrella of #why art is essential. So how do we do that? Really simply put, visit the URL www.artisessential.art. You go to the Get Involved page, and you'll see there'll be 3 very simple steps to take. Arm yourself with the social media assets, which are available in both English and Welsh language. If you search on your Facebook profile picture in the add frame section in both English and Welsh, art is essential, change your profile picture to the frame that is demonstrated here in my profile picture. Step 2, shout loudly about why #art is essential to you or your organisation or who you work for and how you live and your health and your well-being. We've touched upon it today, but we really believe that art will play a critical role in the building back the health and wealth of our country post-Brexit, post-pandemic, but also we need to address the problems that are already existing pre the global issues that we're navigating. So share your story, include facts and figures if you can, and add an image that helps further explain the impact that art has on your life. Then step 3, get others to do it too. Tag individuals, organisations and networks into your posts that you think would be great candidates for this campaign as well, to help spread the word and be part of the visibility. I'll stop sharing there, but if we could ask that you take the energy that you've taken from this webinar today and go straight to social media and do it absolutely immediately, we'll all be doing the same. So I'll hand back to Paula.
Brilliant. Amazing, Katie. Thank you ever so much. And to our panel today, I'm really sorry we've gone over time, but Katie and I are going to stay. And if there's any points that come up in the chat that we can cover and answer for the attendees, but really thank you ever so much to our panel. And just to kind of, say that this is critical. This is so important that we get the visibility out there, and we really do have the agency behind our networks, our colleagues, our friends. Get your aunties, get your mums, get your dads, get your sisters, your brothers, get your kids, get them to, #art is essential, because that's the way that this is going to reach. We've actually managed to keep 450 people here. That means that there's another 400 out there who want to be involved in some way. So we'll be actually communicating that at the end of today as well, out to everyone who signed up and through all of our networks. So thank you ever so much, and best wishes to you all, because we've got a ride to go on, and this is just the beginning. So thank you.
And just before, I am just going to say a thank you on behalf of Paula and everybody at the CVAN staff, who this wasn't even on their work plan in November. This has really been pulled together, and to thank everybody who's contributed, both financially or with additional kind of assets and resources to support this campaign. This is not a campaign that sat with a big budget. So everybody who's contributed, thank you so much for doing this. It has literally been put together very fast, and I thank all our staff across the networks for that. Thank you.